The lights of Kepler Station stretched out like stars in the darkness of space. The massive structure spun slowly, creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who lived and worked inside its metal walls. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods and passengers between the 5 great alien territories that surrounded this neutral meeting place. Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he crawled through another maintenance tunnel. The air was thick and hot in the lower levels where he worked. His blue coveralls were stained with grease and coolant from the endless repairs that kept the station running. 6 months ago, he never imagined he would be living like this, so, far from Earth and everything he knew, his transport ship had broken down while passing through this sector. The engine core had failed completely, leaving him and 12 other passengers stranded at Kepler Station. The others had found ways to buy passage home, or had friends who could help them. Jake had neither money nor connections. He was just a regular guy from Denver who had been traveling to a mining job on the outer colonies. The only work available to humans was maintenance and cleaning. Most alien species looked down on such jobs. They thought manual labor was beneath them. Jake did not care about their opinions. He needed to earn credits to eventually buy a ticket home. Every week, he sent half his pay to his sister back on Earth. She was raising 2 kids alone after her husband died in an accident. The station was like a small city. It had markets, restaurants, living areas, and business districts. Dozens of different alien species walked the corridors together. Some were tall and thin with blue skin. Others were short and covered in fur. There were creatures that looked like giant insects, and others that seemed to be made of living crystal. Jake had learned to recognize most of the species during his months on the station. The Altarians were peaceful traders with long necks and gentle eyes. The Mordani were small, quick creatures who ran most of the technical services. The Vorthik were massive beings who worked in heavy construction and mining. Then there were the Krathens. Jake had learned to avoid them whenever possible. Krathens were warriors from a system known for constant conflict. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick, armored skin that looked like it was made of black metal. Their faces had 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. Long claws extended from their hands, and they moved with the confidence of natural predators. Most other species gave Krathens plenty of space when they walked through the station. Jake had heard stories about their home worlds, where they fought endless wars over territory and resources. They respected only strength and had little patience for what they saw as weakness. In the residential section of the station, far from the wealthy districts where successful traders lived, was a small apartment where an old Zephyrian woman lived with her granddaughter. The Zephyrians were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. They were small and delicate, with skin that looked like it was made of colored crystal. Their skin changed colors based on their emotions, making it impossible for them to hide their feelings. Kira was only 14 years old in human terms, though she was considered an adult by her species. Her skin was usually a soft blue color that meant contentment, but lately it had been shifting to darker shades. Her parents had died in a mining accident 2 years ago, leaving her in the care of her grandmother, Nala. They lived in one of the cheapest areas of the station. Their apartment was tiny, with barely enough room for 2 beds and a small cooking area. Nala worked part-time in the station's recycling center, sorting waste materials for credits. It was not enough to live comfortably, but it kept them fed and housed. Every few days, Kira would make trips to the market to buy food and supplies. She tried to go when the corridors were busy, feeling safer among crowds. The market was a huge area filled with stalls selling everything from fresh food to rare metals. Vendors called out in dozens of languages, trying to attract customers. It was on one of these trips that Kira first encountered Vex. She was carrying a bag of protein bars and vitamin supplements back to their apartment when she accidentally bumped into something hard. The impact knocked her backwards, and her bag split open, spilling its contents across the floor. She looked up to see a massive Krathan warrior standing over her. Vex was large even for his species. His armored hide was covered in scars from old battles, and his claws were longer and sharper than most Krathans. He wore the dark red uniform of a corporate representative, marking him as someone with authority and connections. "Watch where you walk, little crystal," Vex said in heavily accented standard. His voice was deep and rough, like grinding stone. Kira's skin immediately shifted to bright purple, the color of fear. She scrambled to collect her scattered supplies, but Vex deliberately stepped on several of the protein bars, crushing them under his heavy boots. The action was clearly intentional, meant to humiliate and frighten her. "Please," Kira whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need those." Vex looked down at her with his 4 eyes, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "Need? You understand nothing about need, little crystal. Your kind has grown soft living in peace." Other shoppers in the market had noticed the confrontation, but they quickly looked away or found reasons to leave. No one wanted to attract the attention of an angry Krathan. Even the security guards who patrolled the market seemed to suddenly have urgent business elsewhere. Kira managed to save most of her supplies, though several items were ruined. She stood up slowly, her skin still showing bright purple fear mixed with streaks of orange embarrassment. She tried to step around Vex, but he moved to block her path. "Where are you going so quickly?" he asked. "Did I give you permission to leave?" I need to get home," Kira managed to say. "My grandmother is waiting." "Your grandmother?" Vex seemed to find this amusing. Another useless crystal skin, no doubt. "Tell me, little one, what does your family do to earn their place on this station?" Kira did not answer. She could see that other aliens were watching from a distance, but none of them would help her. The Krathans had too much power, too much influence. Their corporations controlled mining rights in 3 different systems, and they had trade agreements with the station administration. "Answer me when I speak to you," Vex said, his voice becoming more threatening. "My grandmother works in recycling," Kira said quietly. "Recycling?" Vex laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "So you live off the garbage of better species. How fitting." He leaned down until his face was close to hers. Kira could smell his breath, which had a sharp chemical odor that made her feel sick. "Perhaps it is time your family learned some respect for their betters." With that, he stepped aside and allowed her to pass. But as she hurried away, Kira could feel his 4 eyes watching her. She knew, with the terrible certainty that prey animals have about predators, that this encounter was not over. It was just the beginning. Far above, in the maintenance shafts, Jake Morrison was replacing a burned-out power coupling when he heard the commotion in the market below. Through a ventilation grate, he had a clear view of the entire scene. He watched as the massive Krathan intimidated the young Zephyrian girl, and he saw how quickly the other aliens abandoned her to face the bully alone. Jake had been on the station long enough to recognize both of them. He had seen the girl, Kira, making her regular trips to the market. He had also seen Vex, one of the most arrogant and aggressive Krathans on the station. The warrior represented a mining consortium that had been pressuring smaller species to sell their mining rights at unfair prices. As Jake watched Kira hurry away, her skin still bright with fear, something stirred in his chest. It was a feeling he recognized from his childhood, when he had seen bullies picking on smaller kids in school. It was the same protective instinct that had made him send money to his sister, even when he could barely afford food for himself. Jake finished his repair work, but his mind was not on the job. He found himself thinking about the frightened girl, and the cruel warrior who had terrorized her. In the depths of the station, where the powerful preyed on the weak, Jake Morrison began to realize that some things were more important than staying invisible and keeping his head down. He did not know it yet, but his life on Kepler Station was about to become much more complicated. The next morning, Kira tried to forget about her encounter with the Krathin warrior. She helped her grandmother prepare breakfast from their small supply of food. Nala noticed that some of the protein bars were missing, but Kira did not explain what had happened. She did not want to worry the old woman, who already had enough problems to deal with Dot after breakfast. Kira left their apartment to attend her classes at the station's education center. Young aliens from many species learned, together in the same rooms, studying math, science, and languages. A Zephyrian girl was one of the best students, though she was too shy to speak up often in class. She took a different route to school, avoiding the main market area where she had met Vex the day before. The station was huge, with many corridors and passages connecting different sections. Kira thought she could easily avoid the Krathin by changing her daily routine. She was wrong. As she walked through a quieter corridor in the residential section, she heard heavy footsteps behind her. The sound of claws clicking against metal flooring made her skin shift to nervous yellow. She walked faster, hoping to reach the busier areas where other people would be around. "Little Crystal," a familiar voice called from behind her. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Kira's skin immediately turned bright purple. She turned around to see Vex walking toward her, his 4 eyes focused on her like a predator watching prey. He moved slowly, confidently, knowing that she had nowhere to run in the narrow corridor. "Good morning," she said quietly, trying to be polite. Her grandmother had always taught her to be respectful to others, even when they were not kind to her. "Is it a good morning?" Vex asked, stopping just a few feet away from her. "I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about your family's place on this station." Kira did not say anything. She could smell the chemical odor of his breath again, and it made her feel sick to her stomach. Her hands trembled as she held her school bag tighter. "You know," Vex continued, "the Krathin Consortium owns mining rights in this entire sector. We provide jobs and resources that keep stations like this one running. We deserve respect for our contributions." "Yes, sir," Kira whispered. "But some species take our generosity for granted. They think they can live here for free, contributing nothing of value." His voice became harder, more threatening. "Perhaps it is time for certain families to start paying their fair share." Vex reached out with one clawed hand and touched Kira's shoulder. The contact sent a shock of pain through her body. Krathins had natural toxins in their claws, a defense mechanism from their home world. The poison was not deadly to most species, but it caused intense burning pain and nausea. Kira cried out and stumbled backward, her skin flashing bright red with pain. The toxin made her vision blur and her stomach twist. She leaned against the wall, trying not to fall down. "Clumsy little Crystal," Vex said with fake concern. "You should be more careful where you walk." He left her there, struggling with the effects of his poison. It took several minutes before Kira felt well enough to continue to school. She was late for class, and her teacher asked if she was feeling sick. Kira said she had eaten something bad for breakfast. During lunch break, she hid in the bathroom and examined her shoulder where Vex had touched her. There was a small burn mark on her crystalline skin, and the area around it had turned a sickly gray color. She pulled her shirt up to cover the mark and tried to forget about the pain. But Vex was not finished with her. Over the next few weeks, he seemed to appear everywhere she went. When she took the transport tube to the education center, he would be waiting at her stop. When she went to the market for groceries, he would corner her in empty aisles. When she tried to visit the station's small library, he would follow her. into the quiet reading areas. Each encounter was worse than the last. Vex would block her path and force her to listen to his lectures about respect and proper behavior. He would deliberately destroy things that belonged to her, stepping on her books or knocking packages from her hands. Sometimes he would touch her with his poisoned claws, leaving burn marks on her arms and shoulders. The worst part was that no one would help her. Other aliens would see what was happening and quickly look away. Security guards would suddenly find urgent business elsewhere. When Vex appeared, even her teachers at school pretended not to notice the burn marks and gray patches spreading across her skin. Kira began to understand that Vex had protection. The Krathan Consortium was too powerful and too important to the station's economy. No one wanted to risk making them angry by interfering with one of their representatives, even when he was clearly abusing his power. She started taking longer routes to avoid him, but Vex always found her. He began to know her schedule better. And she did. Sometimes she would change her plans at the last minute, only to find him waiting for her at her new destination. The fear began to affect every part of her life. She could not concentrate in school. She lost weight because the stress made it hard to eat. Her skin, once a healthy blue color, remained stuck in shades of purple, gray, and red. Her grandmother noticed the changes, but could not understand what was causing them. "Are you being bullied at school?" Nala asked one evening as they shared a small dinner. "No, grandmother," Kira lied. "I am just tired from studying." She could not tell the truth. Vex had made it clear that her grandmother's safety depended on Kira keeping quiet about their encounters. He had described in detail what Krathan soldiers could do to elderly Zephyrians who caused trouble for their superiors. The breaking point came 3 weeks after their first meeting. Kira was walking through a service tunnel, trying to take a shortcut back to her apartment, when Vex cornered her in a dead-end passage. This time, he was not content with just threats and small doses of poison. "I grow tired of these games, little." "Crystal," he said, extending his claws to their full length. "Perhaps it is time for a more serious lesson." Before Kira could react, he slashed across her left arm with his claws. The cuts were deep, going through her crystalline skin into the soft tissue beneath. The poison burned like acid in her wounds, and she screamed in pain and terror. "Remember this feeling," Vex said as he watched her bleed. "Remember it every time you think about disrespecting your betters." He left her there, bleeding and sick from the poison. Kira managed to stumble back to her apartment, where she told her grandmother she had fallen and cut herself on some broken metal. Nala did her best to clean and bandage the wounds, but she did not have proper medical supplies. The cuts healed badly, leaving permanent scars across Kira's arm. The gray patches from repeated poison exposure spread further across her skin. She began to have nightmares about claws and burning pain. During the day, she jumped at every sound, afraid that Vex might appear at any moment. Unknown to both Kira and Vex, someone had been watching these encounters. Jake Morrison's maintenance duties took him throughout the station, often through service tunnels and behind-the-scenes areas that most people never saw. His work gave him access to maintenance cameras, ventilation systems, and forgotten passages that connected every part of the station. At first, Jake had noticed the encounters by accident. He was fixing a broken air filter when he heard voices in the corridor below. Looking through a ventilation grate, he saw the massive Krathan terrorizing the young Zephyrian girl he remembered from the market. After that, Jake found himself paying more attention to both of them. His daily routes took him past the areas where Kira spent her time, and he began to notice the pattern of Vex's behavior. The Krathan was systematically hunting and tormenting the girl, and it was getting worse every day. Jake watched through hidden cameras as Vex destroyed Kira's belongings. He saw the burn marks from poisoned claws spreading across her skin. He witnessed the fear that kept her trapped in corners while other aliens looked away and pretended nothing was happening. The sight made something twist in Jake's stomach. He had grown up in a rough neighborhood in Denver, where bullies were common, and adults often ignored what happened to kids who could not defend themselves. He had always hated that feeling of helplessness, of watching someone suffer while everyone else acted like it was none of their business. After seeing Vex slash Kira's arm and leave her bleeding in the service tunnel, Jake went to the station's security office. He filed a formal complaint, describing what he had witnessed and asking for protection for the girl. The security chief, a bored-looking Altarian named Kex, barely looked at the report. "The individual you describe has diplomatic immunity," he said. "Krathan representatives cannot be arrested or detained without approval from their government." "But she's just a kid," Jake protested. "He's torturing her." "That is a serious accusation," Kex replied. "Do you have evidence? Video recordings? Witness statements?" Jake realized he was trapped by the system. The maintenance cameras were not supposed to be used for surveillance of station residents. Using them to gather evidence would probably cost him his job. And who would serve as witnesses? Every alien on the station was too afraid of Krathan retaliation to speak up. "I thought not," Kex said when Jake did not answer. "I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and leave security matters to trained professionals." Jake spent the next few days thinking about his problem. He could not fight Vex directly. The Krathan warrior was almost twice his size and had natural weapons that could kill a human in seconds. Krathans were built for war. Their thick armor, skin could stop most weapons, and their claws could cut through metal. They were faster and stronger than humans in every way. But Jake had something that Vex did not expect. He had a human brain. During his lunch breaks, Jake went to the station's public library. He used the computer terminals there to research everything he could find about Krathan biology and psychology. Most of the information was basic, the kind of things that traders and diplomats needed to know for business dealings. Jake learned that Krathans came from a world with heavy gravity and thick atmosphere. Their home planet was always at war, with different clans fighting for territory and resources. They respected only strength and had no patience for what they saw as weakness. In their society, the strong ruled and the weak served or died. Their biology was equally impressive. Krathan muscles were 3 times denser than human muscles. Their bones were like metal, and their skin was as tough as armor plating. They had excellent hearing and could see heat patterns with their 4 eyes. The claws on their hands and feet contained powerful toxins that could paralyze or kill most species. But every creature had weaknesses, and Jake was determined to find them. He dug deeper into medical databases and scientific reports. Most of the information was restricted, but Jake had learned how to access maintenance records for the station systems. Those records sometimes included emergency medical procedures for treating different species. The first weakness he discovered was in their eyes. Krathans had compound eyes like insects, which gave them excellent vision but made them sensitive to certain types of light. Bright flashing lights at specific frequencies could cause temporary blindness and severe pain. Second weakness was in their breathing. Krathans needed a lot of oxygen because of their dense muscle mass. Their lungs could not handle certain chemical compounds that were harmless to most other species. Some industrial cleaning chemicals could make them very sick or even unconscious. Third weakness was psychological. Krathans were proud creatures who could not back down from a direct challenge. If someone questioned their honor or strength in the right way, they would fight even when it was not smart to do so. They had to prove they were superior, no matter what the cost. Jake made copies of all the information he found and stored them on a small data pad. Then he began to plan how he could use these weaknesses against Vex. His job as a maintenance worker gave him access to every part of the station. He knew where all the power lines ran, where the water pipes were located, and how the air systems worked. He had keys to storage rooms and service areas that most people never saw. Over the years, the station had grown and changed, leaving behind forgotten rooms and unused passages that connected different sections. Jake began to map out these hidden areas. He identified places where Vex often cornered Kira and started to modify them. Working during his off hours, when most people were asleep, Jake installed small devices in walls and ceilings. In one corridor, where Vex had poisoned Kira several times, Jake hid speakers behind ventilation panels. The speakers could produce high-frequency sounds and bright flashing lights that would hurt Krathen eyes and ears. He connected them to a small control device that he could carry in his pocket. In another passage, Jake rerouted some power cables to create electromagnetic fields. Krathens had bioelectric senses that helped them hunt, but strong electromagnetic fields could confuse and disorient them. The fields would not hurt Vex, but they would make it harder for him to know where Jake was, or what he was doing. Jake also prepared chemical weapons using supplies from the maintenance storage rooms. He built small devices that could release clouds of industrial cleaning chemicals into the air. The chemicals were safe for humans and most alien species, but they were toxic to Krathen lungs. Jake tested the devices in empty rooms to make sure they worked properly. The hardest part was getting the right chemicals. Jake had to sign for everything he took from storage, and too many unusual requests would attract attention. He spread his purchases out over several weeks, taking a little bit at a time and mixing his special orders in with normal maintenance supplies. While he was preparing his battlefield, Jake also started training his body. The station had a small fitness center that was open to all residents. Jake had never used it before, but now he went there every day after work. He lifted weights, ran on treadmills, and practiced with basic fighting techniques he found in old military training videos. Other humans on the station thought it was strange that Jake suddenly cared about fitness. They made jokes about him trying to impress alien women or preparing for a job in security. Jake let them think whatever they wanted. He did not tell anyone about his real plans. Jake also studied human military history. He read about wars where smaller, weaker forces had defeated larger, stronger enemies. He learned about guerrilla tactics, ambush strategies, and psychological warfare. Most importantly, he learned that winning a fight was not always about being stronger. Sometimes it was about being smarter, more prepared, and willing to do whatever it took to protect what mattered. During this time, Jake continued to watch Vex and Kira through the station's maintenance systems. Vex's abuse was getting worse every day. The Krathen seemed to enjoy the girl's fear and pain. He had started grabbing her and dragging her into empty rooms where no one could see what he was doing. Kira was getting weaker and more frightened. Her skin stayed gray and purple all the time now, and she had trouble walking because of infected wounds on her legs. Her grandmother was asking more questions, but Kira still refused to explain what was happening to her. Jake wanted to help her immediately, but he knew he only had one chance to stop Vex. If he acted too soon or made mistakes, the Krathen would kill him and then make Kira's life even worse. Jake had to be patient and wait for the right moment. That moment came when Jake overheard Vex talking to another Krathen in the station's main corridor. They were speaking in their own language, but Jake had learned enough Krathen words to understand the basic meaning. Vex was bragging about his pet crystal and describing what he planned to do to her. The conversation made Jake's blood run cold. Vex was not just bullying Kira anymore. He was planning to hurt her in ways that would destroy her completely, and he was going to do it soon. Within the next few days, Jake realized that his time for preparation was over. He had done everything he could to get ready. His hidden weapons were in place. His body was as strong as he could make it, and he knew Krafen weaknesses better than most scientists. Now he had to put his plans into action before it was too late. That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay on his bed thinking about everything that could go wrong. Vex was still bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than any human. Even with all his preparations, Jake might not be able to win. He might die trying to save a girl he barely knew. But Jake thought about his sister back on Earth, raising her children alone after her husband died. He thought about all the times in his life when he had seen bullies hurting people and done nothing because it was not his problem. He thought about Kira, an innocent girl who had no one else to protect her from a monster. Jake Morrison had always been an ordinary man who kept his head down and minded his own business. But tomorrow, he was going to do something extraordinary. He was going to stand up to a creature that could kill him with one swipe of its claws. He was going to fight for someone who could not fight for herself. He did not know if his human brain and human heart would be enough to defeat a Krathan warrior. But he was going to find out in the darkness of his small room. Surrounded by the mechanical sounds of the station, Jake made peace with the possibility that he might not survive the next day. Some things were more important than staying safe. Some battles had to be fought, even when the odds were impossible. Tomorrow, Vex would learn that humans might look weak, but they became very dangerous when someone they cared about was threatened. Tomorrow, Jake would show the galaxy what it meant to protect the innocent, no matter what the cost. The maintenance worker closed his eyes and tried to rest. In a few hours, he would become something much more dangerous than anyone expected. The next morning came too quickly for Jake. He woke up before his alarm and lay in bed listening to the sounds of the station coming to life. In a few hours, he would either save Kira or die trying. There was no middle ground with the creature. Like Vex. Jake got dressed in his work clothes and checked his equipment one last time. The small control device for his hidden speakers was in his left pocket. A canister of industrial solvent was clipped to his belt, disguised as a normal maintenance tool. In his right pocket, he carried a small knife that he had sharpened to razor edge. It would not do much damage to Krathan armor, but it might help in an emergency. He ate breakfast in the workers' cafeteria, forcing himself to swallow food that tasted like cardboard. Other maintenance workers talked about their daily assignments, complaining about broken air filters and clogged drains. Jake nodded and made appropriate responses, but his mind was elsewhere. After breakfast, Jake went to his supervisor's office and requested permission to work in the lower maintenance tunnels. He told his boss that some of the older systems needed inspection and repair. The supervisor barely looked up from his paperwork as he approved the request. Jake made his way to the residential section where Kira lived. He hid in a service tunnel and watched through a ventilation grate as she left her apartment for school. Her skin was mostly gray now, with patches of angry red around old poison burns. She moved slowly, like someone much older than her years, followed her route through the maintenance passages, staying parallel to her path. He knew that Vex would appear soon. The Krathan had been getting bolder lately, attacking Kira even in areas where other people might see. Kira was halfway to the education center when Vex stepped out of a side corridor, blocking her path. Jake watched from above as the massive warrior loomed over the frightened girl. This time, Vex did not seem interested in his usual games of intimidation. "Little Crystal," Vex said, his voice carrying a new tone of finality. "Today is a special day. Today you learn what happens to creatures who do not show proper respect." Kira tried to back away, but Vex grabbed her arm with one clawed hand. The poison in his claws made her cry out in pain, and her skin flashed bright red. He began dragging her toward a section of the station that Jake knew was mostly empty during school hours. Jake moved quickly through the maintenance shafts, getting ahead of them. He emerged from a service hatch in the corridor where Vex was. Taking Kira, The area was perfect for Jake's plans. He had spent weeks modifying this section, installing his hidden devices, and preparing his battlefield. "Let her go," Jake said quietly, stepping into view. Vex stopped and turned to look at the human. For a moment he seemed confused, as if he could not understand why a maintenance worker would dare to interfere with his business. Then he began to laugh, a sound like metal grinding against stone. "A human?" Vex said with amusement. "You think you can stop me, little soft skin?" Jake did not answer immediately. He was studying Vex's position, making sure the Kraken was standing in the right place for his trap to work. Kira was sobbing with pain and fear, her skin cycling through colors of terror. "Your fight is with me now," Jake said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Let the girl go." "My fight?" Vex laughed again. "Humans do not fight. You are weak creatures, good only for cleaning and serving your betters." Jake had researched Kraken psychology carefully. He knew exactly what words would trigger their pride and force them into a fight. "Is that what you tell yourself when you torture children? That it makes you strong?" Vex's laughter stopped. His four eyes focused on Jake with new attention, and his mandibles clicked with anger. "What did you say?" "I said you are a coward," Jake replied, using formal Kraken phrases he had memorized. "Only a coward needs to hurt innocents to feel powerful. On my world, we have a word for creatures like you." "Speak carefully, human," Vex said, his voice becoming dangerous. "You are very close to earning a painful death." "Bully," Jake said simply. "That is what we call someone who picks on those weaker than themselves. A pathetic creature who cannot win against someone their own size." The insult hit Vex like a physical blow. In Kraken society, being called a coward was the worst possible shame. Warriors who lost their honor were exiled from their clans and forced to live as outcasts. Vex released Kira and stepped toward Jake, his claws extending to their full length. "You dare question my honor?" Vex snarled. "I will show you what happens to insects who forget their place." "Prove it," Jake said, backing toward the area where his hidden weapons were positioned. "Fight someone who can fight back. Or are you too scared?" Vex roared with rage and charged forward. Jake had expected this reaction, but the speed of the Kraken's attack was still shocking. The warrior covered the distance between them in 3 massive strides, his claws slashing through the air where Jake's head had been a moment before. Jake rolled to the side and activated his first trap. Hidden speakers in the walls began producing high-frequency sounds and flashing lights designed to hurt Kraken's senses. Vex stumbled, his compound eyes unable to focus properly in the strobing illumination. "Tricks," Vex growled, but Jake could hear pain in his voice. "You fight like a coward, using machines instead of strength." "I fight like a human," Jake replied, activating his electromagnetic field generators. "We use our brains instead of just our muscles." The electromagnetic fields confused Vex's bioelectric senses, making it hard for him to track Jake's movements. The Kraken swung his claws wildly, striking walls and support beams, but missing his target. Sparks flew from damaged power cables, adding to the chaos in the corridor. Jake stayed in motion, using his knowledge of the area to avoid Vex's attacks. He had practiced this fight dozens of times in his mind, planning every move and countermove. But reality was different from planning. Vex was faster and more adaptable than Jake had expected. One of the Kraken's wild swings caught Jake across the chest, tearing through his work shirt and leaving deep cuts in his skin. The poison from Vex's claws burned like acid, and Jake felt his muscles beginning to cramp and spasm. "First blood to me, human," Vex said with satisfaction. "Soon you will learn why weaker species bow before the Krakens." Jake gritted his teeth against the pain and activated his next trap. Jets of industrial solvent sprayed from hidden nozzles, filling the air with chemical clouds that were toxic to Krathen lungs. Vex began coughing and choking, his breathing becoming labored. "Impossible," Vex gasped. "How do you know our weaknesses?" "I study my enemies," Jake said, pulling out his canister of concentrated solvent. "I learn everything about them before I fight them." He sprayed the chemical directly at Vex's face. The Krathen screamed and clawed at his burning eyes, temporarily blinded by the industrial cleaner. Jake used the opportunity to grab a piece of broken pipe from the damaged wall, but Vex was far from defeated. Even blind and poisoned, he was still incredibly dangerous. He lashed out with his claws, and one of them caught Jake in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a wall. Jake felt something crack in his ribs, and blood ran down his arm from the new wound. The poison was making his whole body weak and sick. He could barely stand, while Vex was already recovering from the chemical attack. "You fight well for a human," Vex said, wiping chemicals from his eyes. "But tricks can only delay the inevitable. I am still stronger, still faster, still better than you." Jake knew the Krathen was right. His traps had hurt Vex, but not stopped him. The warrior still had most of his strength, while Jake was badly wounded and getting weaker from the poison. In a straight fight, there was no way a human could win against a Krathen, but Jake had one more trick that Vex did not know about. "Maybe you are stronger," Jake admitted, raising his hands as if surrendering. "Maybe you are faster. But there is one thing humans have that Krathens do not." "What is that?" Vex asked, moving closer for the killing blow. "We cheat," Jake said, and pressed the final button on his control device. All around the corridor, Jake's hidden chemical dispensers activated at once. Instead of the mild industrial solvents he had used before, these devices released pure ammonia and chlorine compounds that he had been saving for this moment. The combination created a toxic cloud that was deadly to Krathen respiratory systems. Vex realized the trap too late. He tried to hold his breath and charge through the chemical cloud, but his damaged lungs could not handle the poison. He fell to his knees, gasping for air that was no longer safe to breathe. Jake forced himself to stand despite his wounds. He picked up the metal pipe again and approached the dying Krathen. Vex looked up at him with his 4 eyes, and for the first time, Jake saw fear in them. "You cannot kill me," Vex wheezed. "I have diplomatic immunity. There will be consequences." "Consequences," Jake repeated. "Like what you did to Kira. Like all the people you have hurt, because you thought you were untouchable?" Jake raised the pipe, and Vex's eyes widened with terror. The mighty Krathen warrior, who had terrorized innocents for months, was finally afraid. He was the one who was helpless and alone, facing an enemy who would show no mercy. "Please," Vex whispered, and the words sounded strange coming from a creature who had never shown mercy to others. Jake looked into the Krathen's eyes and saw the same fear that Kira had shown every day for weeks. The medical team arrived first, followed closely by station security. Jake sat against the wall, bleeding from his wounds and struggling to breathe through the toxic chemicals that still filled the air. Vex lay unconscious on the floor, his breathing shallow and irregular. The chemical poisoning had damaged his lungs severely, but he would survive. Kira had hidden behind a support beam during the fight, her skin flashing through every color of fear and confusion. When the medics tried to approach her, she shrank back, terrified of any contact. It took several minutes before a gentle Altarian nurse was able to convince her to come out and receive treatment for her poison burns. Chief Security Officer Kex arrived with a team of armed guards. He looked at the scene with obvious displeasure, taking in the damaged corridor, the unconscious Krathen, and the wounded human maintenance worker. His expression suggested that he would rather be dealing with any other situation. "Morrison," Keck said, his voice cold and professional. "You are under arrest for assault on a diplomatic representative." Jake was not surprised. He had known this would happen when he made his choice to fight Vex. The station's administration cared more about maintaining good relations with powerful species than protecting innocent victims. They would sacrifice one human to avoid diplomatic problems with the Krathen Consortium. As the medics worked on his wounds, Jake watched them load Vex onto a stretcher. The Krathen was still unconscious, but his vital signs were stable. He would recover from the chemical poisoning in a few days, and probably demand Jake's execution for daring to fight back. They moved Jake to the station hospital under guard. His injuries were serious, but not life-threatening. The poison from Vex's claws had made him sick, and he had several deep cuts that needed medical treatment. The broken ribs would heal in a few weeks with proper care. While Jake was recovering, word of the fight spread throughout the station. A story grew with each telling. Some people said a human had killed a Krathen warrior with his bare hands. Others claimed it was an accident, that Vex had been hurt by malfunctioning station equipment. A few people whispered that justice had finally come for a bully who had terrorized the weak for too long. On the second day of his recovery, Jake received an unexpected visitor. Kira entered his hospital room quietly, accompanied by her grandmother. The old Zephyrian woman looked tired and worried, but Kira herself seemed different. Her skin was showing colors that Jake had never seen before, soft gold and silver that indicated healing and hope. "I wanted to thank you," Kira said in a small voice, "for helping me." Jake smiled despite the pain from his injuries. "You do not need to thank me. I did what anyone should have done." "But no one else did," Kira replied. "Everyone else looked away. They pretended they did not see what was happening to me." Nala, Kira's grandmother, stepped forward and took Jake's hand in her wrinkled fingers. "You saved my granddaughter's life," she said. "I do not know how to repay such a debt." "There is no debt," Jake said. "Just take care of her. Help her heal from what happened." Over the next few days, more visitors came to see Jake. Other maintenance workers stopped by to express their support. A few even admitted that they had seen Vex bullying people, but had been too afraid to intervene. They respected Jake for having the courage to do what they could not. Some of the visits surprised Jake. Merchants from the market came to thank him for stopping Vex, who had been extorting money from small business owners. Students from the education center brought him cards and drawings. Even some of the alien security guards, speaking quietly so their supervisors could not hear, told Jake that they were glad someone had finally stood up to the Krathen bully. But the most surprising visitor was a Krathen named Vex, who came to the hospital on Jake's 4th day of recovery. Unlike Vex, this Krathen was smaller and wore the simple clothes of a trader rather than military uniform. He seemed nervous as he entered Jake's room. "I am here to speak for my people," Vex said in careful standard. "Not all Krathen support what Vex did. Many of us are ashamed of his behavior." Jake was not sure what to say. He had not expected any Krathen to acknowledge that Vex had done anything wrong. "Vex brought dishonor to our species," Vex continued. "In our culture, warriors who prey on the defenseless are considered worse than cowards. They are expelled from society and forbidden to call themselves Krathen." "What does that mean for me?" Jake asked. "It means that the Krathen Consortium will not seek punishment for his defeat," Vex replied. "Vex has been stripped of his diplomatic status and banned from Krathen space. He will face trial for his crimes when he recovers." Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been prepared to face execution or life in prison for fighting back against Vex. Learning that he would not be punished came as a tremendous relief. Vex was not finished speaking. "There is something else. The consortium has reviewed Vex's activities on this station. We found evidence that he was stealing from our accounts and using his position for personal gain. The money he stole will be returned to his victims. After Vex left, Jake learned more about the investigation into Vex's activities. Station security, suddenly interested in doing their jobs properly, had discovered a pattern of corruption and abuse that went back months. Vex had been taking bribes, threatening business owners, and using his diplomatic immunity to commit crimes without consequences. The scandal forced changes in how the station was run. The administrators could no longer ignore complaints about diplomatic representatives. New rules were put in place to protect vulnerable residents from abuse. Most importantly, a new security unit was created specifically to investigate crimes involving powerful individuals who thought they were above the law. When Jake was finally released from the hospital, he found that his life on the station had changed completely. Instead of returning to his old job in maintenance, he was offered a position in the new security unit. The administrators wanted someone who had proven he would stand up for the innocent, regardless of the personal cost. Jake accepted the job, though he kept his maintenance skills sharp. He knew that understanding how the station worked would make him better at protecting the people who lived there. His first day as a security officer was strange. Instead of crawling through maintenance tunnels, he walked the main corridors wearing a uniform that marked him as someone with authority. Other residents nodded respectfully as he passed, and some of the alien children pointed him out to their parents as the human who fought the monster. Jake made sure to check on Kira regularly during his patrols. She was attending school again and had made new friends among the other students. Her skin showed healthy blues and greens most of the time, though she still flinched when she saw Krathens in the corridors. The healing would take time, but she was no longer afraid to leave her apartment or speak up when something was wrong. One evening, as Jake was finishing his patrol, he stopped by the market where he had first seen Vex. Bullied and Kira. The area was busy with shoppers from many different species. Families were buying food for dinner, and children played between the stalls while their parents conducted business. Near one of the produce stands, Jake saw a young Mordani child being bothered by an older Vorthic youth. The big alien was knocking things out of the child's hands and laughing at his distress. Other shoppers were starting to look away, pretending they did not see what was happening. Jake walked over to the situation calmly, but purposefully. The Vorthic youth noticed him approaching and immediately stopped bothering the Mordani child. Word had spread throughout the station about what happened to bullies who picked on the defenseless. "Is there a problem here?" Jake asked quietly. "No, sir," the Vorthic youth said quickly. "No problem at all." He hurried away without another word. The young Mordani looked up at Jake with grateful eyes and quickly gathered his scattered belongings. Other shoppers who had witnessed the incident nodded approvingly at Jake before returning to their business. As Jake continued his patrol, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. The station felt different now. People seemed more willing to help each other and less afraid to speak up when they saw injustice. Children played in areas that had once been hunting grounds for bullies. Families felt safer walking the corridors at night. Jake knew that one fight had not solved all the station's problems. There would always be those who tried to use their power to hurt others. But now there was also someone watching, someone willing to stand up for those who could not defend themselves. In the depths of space, on a station where dozens of species lived together, a simple maintenance worker had become something more. He had become a protector, a guardian of the innocent, and a reminder that strength was not about size or natural weapons. True strength came from the willingness to do what was right, even when it was dangerous. Jake Morrison had learned that humans might be smaller and weaker than many alien species, but they had something that made them uniquely dangerous to bullies and predators. They had the courage to fight for others, the intelligence to find ways to win against impossible odds, and the heart to show mercy even to their enemies. as he walked through the peaceful corridors of Kepler Station. Jake smiled and continued his watch.